Terrifier has gone from being an indie horror film to a genre-leading franchise. I feel as if the beloved clown needs almost no introduction whatsoever, and even then, I hardly know how I would give him one. Art is a symbol of all things twisted, and I can't help but feel that art takes it to the next level in the latest installment of Terrifier. So before diving straight into this review, I wanted to say that I don't normally review movies. I talk about video games, so bear with me just a little bit on this one. Also, just a heads up, there's kind of going to be two parts of this review, a spoiler-free section first and a spoiler section after, with timestamps to guide you in the right direction. So with that being said, let's get straight into it. Terrifier 3 wastes no time at all when it comes to setting the tone for this movie. If you saw the first two films, then you have a general idea of what you're in for. But this first scene sets such a unique tone for the movie. Not only does it follow the horror movie trope of having an opening kill, but it sets a tone just eerie enough to make even the most joyful holiday of them all incredibly off-putting. The lack of music and dragging camera shots make you feel almost as if you're the intruder in someone else's home. It's truly uncomfortable from the start, as any normal movie would kind of fill this strange silence with music or more ambience. But the most noise we'll get here is some conversation right before Art gets to work. However, it's in this scene where we see just how brutal of a film Terrifier 3 actually is. Damien Leone takes an ambitiously just disgusting route that most people would draw the line at, but this is just the opening of the movie. I promise it continues to get so much more brutal and deadly. So after the title card and intro sequence, we are put on a little side quest with our friend Art to fill out some exposition on how Art arrives from point A to point B in the film. Everyone knows that exposition is usually the worst part of a movie, and it's a dangerous game to do this so early into the film. But what makes this work so well in this movie is that it's done almost entirely without any lines of dialogue, meaning that the show don't tell rule is in full effect. We get to actively watch how the story unfolded after part 2 and how it leads into part 3, rather than just being told by one of the characters. I wish so many more movies would do this, but even if they did, it probably wouldn't be executed nearly as well as it is here. So once we figure out what our favorite clown has been up to, we are reintroduced to our new favorite horror final girl. It's no secrets at all that Sienna Shaw would be back. And Lauren Lavera? Hopefully I don't butcher that. Lauren Lavera brings her absolute all into this role. We see how the events of the second film affected her and how she tries to move forward. We are also introduced to a new side of the family that will be the main supporting cast throughout the movie, which allows us to see another dynamic with Sienna and her loved ones. Always nice to see, but knowing the franchise, it just might not last that long. This movie explores a lot more creative locations than the previous two movies. There's a ton of variety in the settings, and the set design made sure to take full advantage of the winter time period that this film is set in. For as bloody and gory as this movie gets, I've never just wanted to curl up next to a fire with a glass of eggnog more than I did while watching this movie in the theaters. Now, with the large variety of locations comes a large variety of Art's dubious acts of violence. There is no shortage of brutality and blood spilling here. No shortage of moments you just can't help but cringe at in a good way. Terrifier 3 also takes Art's character to a completely different level with how genuinely just hilarious this guy is. From start to finish, without saying a single word, Art expresses his emotions perfectly and has such a charm to him. This dude is just filled with charisma, but at the same time, he brings such a sinister vibe to the party. Art is kind of what I would call a vignette character. He's got such a massive, radiating outer layer of darkness to him, while maintaining so much life in the center of who he is, which is perfectly displayed by his facial expressions and gestures. This is incredibly apparent in the second act of the film, as we get to explore a bit more of the narrative with the film's B-plot. The B-plot follows some new characters and almost parodies of TikTokers or other internet personalities. Don't worry, I know not everyone likes to be super meta in their movies, but this one does it quite well with a satisfying wrap-up to the side story, while also maintaining momentum in the A-plot by showing character development. So without talking about the details, we see that the movie in the third act closes with some really great cinematography and intense action sequences for the characters we've come to love. It is one of the most brutal finales we've seen yet, with nothing but love poured into it by the entire team behind the film. There are plenty of questions left unanswered while also providing new questions for the audience to ask. I think overall this story is a bit rough around the edges, and I'll get to that soon in the spoiler section. But no one is really showing up expecting a Christopher Nolan level of story. We are here to watch things happen that probably shouldn't be allowed to be watched in a movie theater. This movie is a home run in a solid trilogy, full of blood, guts, gore, and passion by every single person who helped work on it. Now, unfortunately, there are a few things that I felt were a bit rushed in the final act that I need to talk about, but really kind of can't without spoiling it. So here's your warning now to either close the video or skip ahead past the spoiler timestamp to see our final verdict while still avoiding spoilers. Okay, so yeah, spoilers now, alright? Like I said, you've been warned. That opening scene was insane. It's almost like an unwritten rule of horror to never kill children, but this little bro gets got, dude. This dude gets fucked. The limbs being severed, the X scene where the dude gets absolutely destroyed in his bed, and the implication of the ending where Art has no problem at all continuing to murder children, it's a ballsy move. Like I said, there is no shortage of moments here to make you uncomfortable. There's specifically one scene where Art essentially gets reawakened by a construction crew sent to scout out an abandoned building before bulldozing it. This is where they find Art has been kind of balling out for the last 5 years. Art once again does what he's known for and makes a total fool out of the construction workers, and it's here that we get a very questionable sexual scene. For context, Art has a fellow murderous friend. I don't know their actual name, so we'll just call her Vessel, as that's basically what she is. The Vessel kills one of the crewmates by stabbing them with a shard of glass straight to the neck. Once she finishes that, she heads upstairs where she walks in on Art breaking the hands of the other construction worker. The Vessel is clearly turned on by this and begins inserting this shard of glass straight into her cooter at a very rapid rate. As one would imagine, it's not exactly a pretty sight to see. This scene carries on for almost too long. It's not just a quick 10 seconds. See, this is like a minute or two of torture followed by glass inserting. This was a wicked experience and not something that I ever thought I would be watching in a movie theater next to my friend, but here we are. There's basically two parts to life. It's either pre-Terrifier 3 or post-Terrifier 3. You're living in one of the two. So after this insane sequence, we cut to Sienna, who is making her way out of a mental hospital to go stay with her mom's side of the family. Sienna is very clearly suffering from just about every mental illness you could think of after the events of the second movie. Absolutely justified. Primarily PTSD and hallucinations, which no doubt go hand in hand with each other. We see Sienna's family is still a bit skeptical about having her around, doubting that she's stable enough to be around her younger cousin, as she begins to hallucinate and cause a very small scene at the first dinner together. I don't remember the cousin's name, or actually any of the additional family members, to be honest, like at all. But she's a bit of an interesting character. She's innocent, but also not entirely likable. She's annoying and stubborn, as many 10 to 12-year-olds kind of are. She goes snooping through Sienna's diary, which happens to be bigger than about 3 Bibles stacked together, and gets a look into just how messed up Sienna really is. But of course, she doesn't understand the gravity of the situation and is able to be convinced that it was all in Sienna's head after a bit of a conversation. So Sienna takes her cousin to the mall to buy her brother Jonathan a Christmas gift. This is where we see Sienna's second hallucination, or that's what the movie kind of makes it out to be. Unfortunately, it's a bad day to be a child at the local mall, as Art has made his way there with gifts for just a few kids. He dresses up as Santa Claus and hands out gifts that end up exploding and lighting the corpses of dozens of children on fire. Just a normal Tuesday for children at the mall. That's right, Art isn't just out for one kid. This dude's about to get all of them. But how did he get his DLC Santa Claus outfit? Well, there is this insane bar scene somewhere in the timeline of this movie where Art is at his best, to be honest, during this film. Art is making tons of jokes and almost getting along with the gentleman at the bar, one of which is wearing a Santa suit. I'm sure you can see where this is going. All is going well until Santa buys Art a drink, which he then spits back in his face and follows that up with pissing on him. You just can't make this up. Art quite literally pisses on Santa Claus. He shoots 2 out of the 3 bar guys in the head, clean shot. Art must have been practicing his aim in Call of Duty after his new operator bundle in Warzone. Anyways, We then get another one of his best kills in this movie. Art ties up Santa Claus and uses liquid nitrogen to pop open every limb this guy has. His shins, his hands, his face. It's a gory and over the top as it comes, which we all love about this movie and this franchise. I almost wish we could have seen some insane ankle breaking here, but there's a kill coming up that tops that idea anyways. So we are about halfway through the movie, and we have some insane kills listed already, but I gotta take a step back again and talk a bit more about the story. So Jonathan is in college this time around, and he has a roommate who kind of has this fling with this girl, who also happens to host a true crime podcast. She really lives up to how insensitive someone like this in the real world is kind of expected to be. She asks Jonathan to hop on the podcast and talk about his experience with Art, which of course he is a bit hesitant to do so. He then meets up with his sister Sienna to talk about Art and how he's back and what the game plan will be. They decided that Sienna needs to go get the sword she used to take down Art in the second movie, or the Terrifier, and finish the job. They agreed to meet back at their aunt's house later that night. Jonathan goes back to his dorm and starts to have a bit of a panic attack, knowing just how dire of a situation this is. So this is kind of the last time we will get to see Jonathan, which is one of the biggest issues I have with this film, but we'll get there. Come back to the roommate and the podcast host. She offers sexual favors if the roommate is able to convince Jonathan to hop on the podcast. He agrees because she's fine as fuck and says that he will try. She spends time almost admiring Art and praising how insane he is. And it turns out Art made his way to the college campus and is actually listening to the conversation. Art, in another one of his best moments, is smiling and laughing and almost flattered by the way she is praising him. When the roommate says, "It sounds like you want to fuck him," in which her response is, "No, I don't." This is where all the flattery flushes from Art's face as you could see the visual disappointment and hand gestures take place. This was such a funny moment as it shows that he does take pride in what he does, and once again becomes careless after the compliments stop. Funny enough, these two folk are some of the most brutal kills in the movie. It's a shower scene with the two of them having their funny business as Art is sharing the same bathroom, wiggling every last drop of piss out of himself, before killing the guy with the chainsaw. But of course it's never that simple. Art hacks away with the chainsaw at the guy, cutting off like half of his hand, completely mangling up his body and cutting half of his leg off, with the leg still barely attached. The man goes to run, and of course, he's just gotten out of the shower, so his feet are slippery, and his leg just folds in on itself all over the floor. This is one of the moments that got me cringing, actually out of this entire movie. This one scene in particular is the one that it did it for me, man. I will praise the way that this scene is shot and just the cinematography of the leg snapping in on itself. Dude, it was so great. It was disgustingly perfect. So shout out Damien once again for just nailing everything he does. This dude is genuinely so talented. This is another death scene that almost goes on too long though, for the sake of gore, but once again, that's what we're here for. So this dude gets chainsawed in half from the balls up, straight up credit carded in the ass with a chainsaw, with every last bit of this dude's balls and ass on frame, for the whole time. You are seeing this get mangled up, bro. It's not a pretty sight. Then the girl gets scalped and mangled as well. Not a happy ending, but that's a wrap for our B plot. So, Act 3. This is probably where all of my issues with the movie really take place. We have a sequence where the uncle is going to pick up Jonathan from campus, and we hear a demonic voice answer the phone that sounds similar enough to Jonathan to confuse him. We have a bit more of a time jump where Sienna wakes up and checks her phone to see it's about 1 a.m. and Jonathan still isn't home. She goes downstairs and Art is there, which I thought would for sure be a hallucination because the whole movie feels like it's building up to a proper reunion between these characters, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. She pretty much just turns a corner and he's there. This really could have been done in a much more satisfying way, but I guess it needed to be done to speed things up, so I understand a little bit, but I'm not entirely sure. Sienna gets knocked out and wakes up tied up in the living room across from her aunt. Both are tied up and have tape over their mouths. We see the uncle's body gutted and hung up on the wall as a Christmas decoration and his head on top of the tree, which Art then brings out a skinned head implied to be Sienna's younger cousin. Art goes back and forth from the living room to the dining room to grab tools, leading to his most comedic moment of the entire movie. I might even go as far to say the most comedic moment out of all 3 movies. Each time he comes back from grabbing a new tool, he just smacks the crap out of the back of Sienna's head. This happens like 2 or 3 times, and I just continue to laugh harder and harder like each time that it happened. I honestly wish it happened a few more times than it did. This was genuinely just so funny. The whole theater was laughing. Me and my buddy were just cracking the fuck up. This was great. More of this, please. It was so funny. But the laughs pretty much go mute almost immediately as Art uses hollow piping, double the size of an average person's mouth, and uses a hammer to pound it into the mouth of the ant. He then puts rats down the tube and cuts them out of her throat. It's pretty disturbing. I'm not gonna lie. The rats was fine, but forcing that tube, not a good look. Not something that everybody's gonna want to see. Once again, this movie is so beyond twisted, and I hope they never change. However, this is the moment that bothered me the most in the movie. It is revealed that the younger cousin is fine, and the head that is skinned is actually Jonathan's. Like, bro, it's one thing to kill this character, but it's another to do it off screen, when he's hardly had any screen time to develop at all. There was so much more for this character to do, and so many better ways to kill his character off, but if that's the route they wanted to go with killing him, I don't think this was it. But doing this off screen, dude, it was so disappointing for me. Jonathan did not get much of a chance to show off any development in this entire movie, and it kind of breaks my heart. Elliot Fullman is a promising young actor. He's very clearly passionate about this role. It sucks that he didn't get to show off his best in some sort of chase sequence with Art the Clown. There was no on-screen encounter at all. This decision is just so baffling to me, and I just don't understand why this was done. His character was not developed enough for this to be a justified, shocking twist. Besides a few tears from Sienna, there's really not even another mention of this in the film. There was no payoff to this death at all, so the best copium I can give myself is by somehow saying, well, Jonathan isn't actually dead. This isn't the case. It was just the head of one of the other people he killed during the movie. But honestly, I don't believe that's the case. I think he's fucking dead. Now that I have my biggest issues out of the way, there's a final fight scene where the cousin gets the sword into the hands of Sienna. She manages to behead the vessel and puts on a great fight with Art. It's a classic case of bringing a sword to a chainsaw fight. Sienna does take some brutal beatings while she was tied up, but the magical sword hits her with the Resident Evil 7 Ethan Winters treatment, completely healing her. A demonic-looking portal opens up and the cousin falls into it, forcing Sienna to choose between finishing the job and killing Art or saving the cousin. She goes for the save but fumbles before getting the reboot card, leaving the sword and the cousin's fate unknown. As for our beloved clown, he dips out the window and reflects upon his productive day while at a bus stop. This leads into the opening scene of the movie, I think, unless I got that timeline wrong. It's possible. I don't know. The movie ends with Sienna losing everything, just like The Last of Us 2, and Art the Clown taking a bus to his next victim's house. It's not the most poetic ending. I really don't think it's deep or that there's a hidden meaning out there. I just think it's supposed to be an ending that justifies future installments, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said before, no one is just here for the plot. Like, no one's here for the plot. We all want to walk out of the theater feeling like we just experienced the most violent things imaginable, and this movie far surpassed that feeling. So Terrifier 3 is exactly what it set out to be. It's an insane roller coaster of comedic highs and violent lows that surpass all of the previous installments. The actors bring their absolute best to this project, and I really hope we get to see more of them in the next one. The gore is as gruesome as you could ever imagine and makes Saw look like it's a movie for kids. I couldn't recommend this movie enough to those who love this kind of stuff, to those who are willing to put themselves through hell and back in a movie theater, and to those who just love the character that Damien Leone worked so hard to bring to life. This is another banger in the trilogy of Terrifier movies, and I just can't wait for the next one. I wish it was out like next month or this year or sometime soon. I don't know if I have another 2 years of waiting time in me, dude. Like, get this shit out ASAP, dude. However, with the fourth movie somewhat confirmed, but not really, but Damien Leone has mentioned that he still has a few Terrifier movies left in him. I really hope that we get a more fleshed out approach to the narrative and the most disgusting display of brutality that one can legally put on the big screen. I give this movie a solid 9 out of 10. And you guys 100% need to go support this team and their movie. It's so worth it. I promise. These people are so talented, so creative, and so messed up. Alright, so that's going to be my review for Terrifier 3. As for those of you who have shown up to support my channel for a while, you guys know I normally only cover video games and will probably still continue to do so. And I really appreciate you guys giving me a chance at trying something new. I really hope you guys all enjoyed this review. I had a lot to say about this movie, and I just hope that I was able to convince at least one person to go see this, as I really do think all of you horror movie lovers would probably get a good kick out of it. I'll be back to my regular scheduled programming with gaming content here soon. So thanks for being patient and watching my first attempt at a movie review. It means the world to me. So I will see you guys next time, and until then, piss off, everyone.